Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Numbers Matter, a small business-oriented podcast about the value and the success that really comes out of having clarity with your numbers as a small business owner. My name is John Leland, and I'm here with Chris Wakehoff, our numbers guru at Numbers Matter, a bookkeeping and accounting firm in Arizona that really does the hard work of helping small businesses get clear about their numbers and get the empowerment that comes from that. And our cohort in this podcast is Christy Stroud, who is a coach and author at ChristyStroud.com. She's the author of several books, including Passion, Plan, Profit, that is very much organized around this, our January episode, as we move into the new year and talk about the power that comes from budgeting, in particular with small business numbers. And Chris, I know that you deal with this every day with your clients. What is the power of having a budget for the year, and what does it take for a small business to really use a budget effectively so that it empowers success?
Yeah, and we're, at the beginning of the year, so we have new budgets in place for a lot of clients. Some of them are pretty straightforward, where we take like a business who probably isn't going to have a spend or revenue increase or decrease much over what they did over a historical past period, which could be as simple as last year, or maybe it's the average of 3 years. And then we just put a budget in place, and then we compare as we move through the new year, performance versus what the budget was. We have a client who really wants to know, what's the cash flow? Like, do I have enough money to pay my bills? And the one way to do that is a cash flow analysis, which we can do. The other is to do a budget. So in her case, it's a little bit more challenging because she's on a growth plan. So she's really growing her business. There's going to be a lot more revenue and a lot more expense this year. It is not going to go up in a straight line. It is not going to be based on the historical past. So it's just really a tool that we have to work with and craft and see how well we can get to a guidepost. And the guidepost is there enough money to pay your bills? So that's really important. But budgets can be simple, they can be complex, but they're all a really great tool for managing mostly your expenses, or if you've got expenses related to revenue, those expenses as well, so that you can achieve the goals that you have for your business this year.
Christy, he makes that sound so easy. I have imagined that you have a lot of clients that might not think budgeting is so straightforward. Is that true?
No, a lot of times people associate the word budget with diet, and neither of them sound like they would be very much fun. But it's actually, budgeting can be, I know this sounds weird, but it can be fun. Chris can make it fun. And what's fun about it is that you can start to make some predictions about what the business is going to look like during the year. And people don't use this word very much about budgets, but it's a vision for what you want to happen during the year, how much you want to sell, who you want to sell to, what you want to sell them. And it's a kind of vision board in numbers. And when people look at it like that, when I have clients look at it that way, then it seems way more interesting. The other thing that I think makes people not want to do this very much is that they think they're supposed to predict the future with 100% accuracy or even 50% accuracy. And the whole point of a budget is, you don't want it to be completely not based in reality, but it's a starting place. I don't know if I can quote this exactly. Dwight Eisenhower said, plans are useless, but planning is essential. And that is kind of what's going on here, is that when I do this with clients and with myself, and I think Chris does this too, is I don't get married to the budget. And I don't need to beat myself up because I didn't guess perfectly. It's just a place to start looking, a way to point how I'm looking and where I'm looking to see if what I thought was going to happen actually happens. And it almost never does, but it really helps start showing me where to look and then where to adjust when what I planned, work ends up unfolding a different way.
Great. So I want to get more into the nitty gritty of budgets, but Chris, I still think there's a lot to be said about the resistance that a lot of businesses have or business owners have.
Yeah.
So with your clients who you work with on an ongoing basis, yes, they probably already have a budget for 2022. But what about most of us, myself included, even as a business owner of many decades, I tend to wing it. I'm that kind of business owner. How do I get over my resistance to really do more in the area of clarity with numbers, particularly around budgeting? What's your inspiration to do that?
I think that it is a difficult topic for some people. They're just not really interested in doing it. They think that they can't do it right, or like Chrissy said, they think it's like a diet. I would say out of the 100+ entities that we work with on a monthly basis, maybe 10 of them have a budget in place.
Wait, will you say that again? Out of how many?
Yeah, out of over 100 entities we work with each month, only about 10 of them have a budget.
Whoa. And why is that?
And in some cases, don't really need one. They have huge cash flow, or they're getting the information they need from their standard financial reporting package in the month. They're not really interested in doing it. In some cases, it's resistance. They feel that they just don't have the information to do a good budget, which is something that we can work with, but we need the client to work with us on it. And some clients just aren't willing to do that. They don't see the value of the tool. So if they don't see the value of the tool, and budgeting is a great tool, then in that case, it doesn't make sense to do that for them. But we do recommend that every client have a budget, no matter what type of business that they have.
And Christy, passion plan profit seems to play right into this. Is there more that you want to add in terms of kind of why it is a tool that, there's a lot of people that don't get the value. And, it's like, I think as we look at people coming into a new year and wanting to do it freshly, how does a budget contribute to business success?
It contributes in a bunch of different ways, but they're sort of subtle, I think. So first of all, if you sell a lot of different things, products and services, one of the things the budget will do for you, or at least starting out, is to see, okay, how much of my sales is made up by this, and this products and services, and then what does it cost the business to deliver those products and services? And when you start realizing, hey, this one thing I sell, I make way more money on it than these other 5 things, that's really valuable. You can figure that out in retrospect, like Chris is talking about. And I think a lot of businesses do that. You can look at especially if Chris sets up your financial reporting, you can look at your financial reports for the past month or the past 3 months or whatever, and see how much you're making on each thing that you sell. But if you know in advance that this service makes twice as much as this other service, then you can start taking action now to sell more of what makes more money, rather than waiting till in arrears, getting the information after the fact. A budget can actually drive your, not just can, but probably should drive your marketing.
You don't know what in your business is making more money unless you have the clarity with numbers to measure the profitability. The other thing that I can offer from my experience is, that thing of a budget being like a diet. I have heard people use the term spending plan. And the complement to that is the income plan. Budgeting isn't always about just budgeting your expenses. I find that looking at, like, my company does different kinds of services. And when I look at actually planning and projecting and, like you said, having a priority of I want more of this kind of income versus that kind of income, that opens up clarity and empowerment through clarity. Is that something you also see, Chris? Is it people are not planning their income as well as not planning their expenses? I mean, particularly, I guess it's more, again, like we said in the last episode, it's your prospective clients versus the clients that you've already helped have clarity.
Yeah, and my favorite thing about budgets is really two places: payroll, which is a controllable cost, and advertising. So advertising is often related to how much revenue you have. So if you've got a budget or a metric, there's a ton of great metrics out there for every industry. You have your own metrics as a business over what you've done in your past that can be put together. So if your advertising, for example, is a percentage of your revenue, and you want to increase that and you don't have a resulting increase in revenue, then if you can monitor that pretty early on in your increased advertising spend, then you can pivot to something that's working if you can identify something that's not working. So that's a big factor about budgeting that I really like. But for others, yeah, I think what a business owner often will get into trouble with is their own salary draw, distribution, payroll, whatever mechanism in which they're taking the money out. They'll just take it based on their personal needs, not on what the business needs. And then either they're suffering on a personal needs basis because they didn't take enough out to cover their personal life, or they've taken too much out of the business and the business is going to suffer, or some combination like that. So really budgeting it starts with the person. What are your needs as a business owner to pay yourself? And then how do we get there? And then how do we measure that? How do we compare it? How do we know in March where you are and where you need to be? In tax planning, which happens usually in the fall, it's one of the things that we look at from a tax perspective. How much payroll should you have if you're in a structure where you have payroll to satisfy like an S Corp situation, for example? Or how much distribution are you going to need for the coming year, and then plot backwards to get to that point where you have the money that you need, where the business also has the money that it needs. And so it's very intertwined to a business owner's personal life. And I think that while we think that's really important, we've had many conversations about that with clients. The clients have a block or fear or something about that, or feel that somehow we are going to tell them no,
Right.
when they take money out, or judge them, which we don't do. We just try to give you as much information as we can.
We should start a movement, because budgets are associated with having to eat white bread and canned beans, I think, and massive deprivation. And budgets are totally don't need to be like that at all. People talk about sticking to a strict budget. I mean, it sounds horrible. And instead of associating it like that, with deprivation, that it'd be really great if we could figure out a way to associate it with clarity and abundance and the ability to make decisions about your business. Chris can talk about this a little bit, the idea or what happened if business is growing. Often you have to pay your employees before you collect the revenue. And if you're making a lot more money and serving people, it's really good to know that in advance, so that if you have to go to the bank and get some sort of loan to cover the payroll before the money gets collected. Doctors, medical practices are like that a lot, I think, when they grow. And anybody that's got a lot of payroll, if you're growing, you're going to have to pay payroll before you collect the revenue. And somehow the money has to come from someplace. And having a budget will tell you that that's going to happen before you wake up, in March and realize, holy cow, I can't make payroll.
Yeah, what I have a lot of clients, unfortunately, they've done is they haven't done the plan. They don't have the budget. They don't know the information. Some bill comes up, either they expected it or didn't expect it. And what they've done is take a loan from PayPal or Square or Cabbage or any, American Express does loans. I mean, everybody goes after the business owner for these loans. In some cases, the loan payment, like in Square's case, is a percentage of your future Square transactions. So you're not even in control of the payment. You're not really control of the interest rate. I can tell you that none of those loans benefit the business owner except for giving you the short-term cash infusion you needed to get over some crisis that honestly probably could have been avoided if you'd had a budget. So then you're trapped in a cycle of recurring loans from these mechanisms that are expensive and really impact your cash flow negatively, make it harder for you to plan for the future because now you're going to have less cash flow because you're losing a percentage of every transaction that you have until that loan is paid off. The interest rates are higher than traditional lending, like commercial lending. That said, they're super easy to achieve. Almost anybody can get a loan like that, and they're very attractive. We always recommend clients never do that. That doesn't mean that a lot of clients haven't done it and are still, there's many that are still doing it right now.
Christy, I want to join your movement here about budgeting not being a bad thing, but being a good thing. So how do we reframe that? I think you both have ideas about that, no?
Yeah, Chris had you called it a fiscal planning tool. It just is so associated with, you can never go to Starbucks and get another latte again in your life if you have a budget. It's just awful.
Well, and we started the conversation talking about visioning. Mm-hmm. And, in terms of numbers, a budget is a vision. And when you think about it in that way, it has the empowerment of planning and really kind of like, oh, this is going to help me grow my business. This is going to help me have my business be more profitable through the kind of clarity that we're talking about. That's our mission here. So a budget's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, right? Are we all agreeing? It's like, yes. It actually is a success tool. Like, fiscal planning feels I'm still a little bit resistant, but if you call it a visioning tool to help me be more profitable, then, that sounds a little more attractive.
Yeah, be more profitable, make better decisions. I've had so many clients that spend a really inappropriate amount on advertising thinking that it's going to translate to revenue. And it just doesn't happen. So I think it's really important, not just to get to profit, but also just to spend wisely. I'd rather a client spend money for themselves than to spend it on a business expense that isn't achieving any purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I guess you've said advertising twice now, and so is the marketing guy in the group. One of the beautiful things about online advertising is that if you have clarity with your numbers and really track your conversions, you can get right down to the dollar number of whether that advertising money that you're spending has an ROI, has a return on the investment or not. And then if you are getting the ROI, then you don't get into what the problem that Chris is talking about, right?
Yeah.
Another
right.
example of how clarity with numbers really helps.
Yeah.
So you touched on it a little bit, Chris, in terms of personal versus business. But maybe we can expose that process a little bit more in a little bit more detail. When you're looking at budgeting for the year, how does that distinction matter? I'm a big fan. I didn't used to separate my business expenses, and I think it makes a huge difference to make the business its own entity with its own expenses and its own income, and then my personal side has the income that I'm paying myself and my personal expenses, and separating that. Do you both agree? And why is it so important to make that distinction, particularly around, planning for 2022?
I think if you don't have clarity on the personal side of your life, and there's a lot of great tools out there. QuickBooks does a tool called Mint that's free, that's pretty easy to set up and do a budget, but there's many other tools out there. You need to know how much money you need, especially as a business owner. You need to know what your monthly requirement is. And without that number, it's really difficult to do the budget on the business side. Yeah. So they are very interrelated. In the best case scenario, the business owner does a personal budget and a business budget. Mm-hmm. That is, separated between business and personal expenses. I've got clients that commingle. So they've got their personal and business lives running through the same 4 credit and debit cards, let's say. So it's a lot harder work to get those separated, but it's really important work because, there's no achieving success if you don't have the clarity about what's happening and how much money you need and what you're spending money on and all those really important metrics that are a component of business success.
Yeah. Yeah. The business needs a spending plan, budget. And on the personal side, I just found, and with clients too, that the personal side spending, it's so useful to have a budget, or I like to call it a spending plan because that's a little less fraught of a word or a term. But then you can put your money where your heart is on the personal side. One of the things that Chris often talks about is the large part of having a business is having it support you as the business owner, having it meet your goals. I mean, it's not a completely selfish thing because we've got our clients and vendors and, it's a community, but the business needs to support the business owner's goals and visions. And some of the most clarity filled ways to figure out what your vision is for yourself is to figure out where you want to spend your money.
Yeah, and I find as a business owner, I need to know, and I haven't always, but I need to know how much am I paying myself.
Yes.
So I am an expense. My payroll,
Absolutely.
my corporate draw that I give to myself as compensation is a number. And when you commingle, like you were talking about before, Chris, then you lose track of, well, is this business profitable, and is it paying me a living, and if so, how much, right? So that's a big piece of clarity, is knowing what the business is paying the business owner.
Yeah.
So the other part of this spending plan, income plan, planning with the numbers process is, how do we follow up? And we touched on it at the beginning, but I think we really want to drill down a little deeper in terms of the way people, one of the dangers or challenges I think that I've had with goals is, well, what if I don't hit them?
Yes.
And a budget is like, God knows how many lines of income and how many lines of expenses, and I'm probably not going to get it right. So tell me more about how I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot by budgeting, because I'm going to budget and then be wrong about it.
Well, there's nothing wrong.
Yes. Thank you.
First of all, no matter what happens, I know that Christy works with a budget and a spreadsheet that works for a lot of people. We can set that up, make it easy to fill in and track your progress. If you're working in QuickBooks Online and some other versions of QuickBooks, there is a great budgeting feature in there. You basically upload or input the budget in it's very similar to a spreadsheet format. And then you run your numbers every month. It's a budget to actual report. So on every single category, you will see how well you did versus your budget. It gives you the dollar variance. Really easy to read if it's set up properly. Really easy to keep track of. It's also easy to edit. So if you get to June and you're like, hey, this one number isn't the right budget number, I want to change it to this, then we can do it. But as Christy pointed out earlier, the importance is that it gives you the clarity to look at something and be like, okay, well, I know why that's off, or I need to do something about this so it's not off, or hey, I'm doing it. I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do. And having that information to be able to have those conversations is what's really the most important.
Christy, fill us in, because this is, I think, where people get challenged emotionally about doing this kind of budgeting and then reporting and seeing what actually happens. How do you help people embrace the process rather than resist it?
Oh gosh, it does with a lot of my clients, and I think it's because partly they're smaller business owners and they're very personally, I'm involved in the success or failure of their businesses. Chris was talking about people funding their dream business with personal credit cards. And I think that kind of emotional attachment happens with budgeting also, or any kind of business planning. And it's a process of realizing that you are not your business and you're working in your business and you're working on your business, but you are not your business. And there's so many factors that are out of all of our control. And, it doesn't mean we lie down and on the floor and cry and give up, but I mean, just COVID itself, talk about something that's completely out of our control. It's a process of not taking all that stuff personally and just realizing, okay, this is reality. I thought it was going to be this, but it's now this. So what am I going to do now that I know what reality is? There's a really easy example. Gas prices are increasing a lot. I've increased a lot in the last 3 or 4 months, and I don't know what will happen. But if I have a business where I'm running a lot of trucks and I think my gas cost is going to be this, but it's actually this, that's a really good thing to know in advance so that I can adjust before it completely gets out of hand and I didn't notice. So
Yeah.
it's a process of detaching and realizing that you can only do so much. You can only influence what's going on so much, and you have to try, but there's just a lot of things that are completely out of our control.
Yeah, what you're reminding me, actually, I was listening to the Will Smith memoir autobiography called Will that came out recently, and he has a section in there where he basically says our job in life is to learn, and nobody knows what they're doing to start with. And we all need to learn. And if we get the lessons that life is delivering us, then we keep learning and growing. And that's what life is about. And without a spending plan or an income plan, and then seeing what the numbers are and then seeing what the results actually are and what are our businesses trying to teach us as a result of reading those reports and telling the truth. This income category isn't really working. Or like we said before, it's not really profitable. But we learn that, this one actually has a sweet spot to it. And let's put more energy there because it's working. Yeah. So clarity with numbers, that's what I think it means to empower success through clarity with numbers. Any other closing remarks, as we want all of you to have a successful 2022 and do that with clarity with numbers? Any closing remarks or things that we've left out that we should have covered?
I think just one quick thing that you just mentioned, John, is that businesses speak a different language. They speak the language of number. And it's kind of like having a really close friend who speaks Russian. You kind of need to learn Russian to be able to communicate with them, just the way that you need to learn how to speak number to communicate with your business. And then you can learn. The business has so much to teach us. Once I learn how to speak its language, then I can start learning. And Chris's work is instrumental in that. It can help business owners understand what the business is actually trying to tell them, trying to teach them.
Yeah. And that's why we're all here.
Yes.
Because numbers matter.
Yeah, numbers matter. That's
true,
right.
do.
It's not just a pun, folks. It actually makes a difference. And and I think, not to try and be too promotional, but it's like having a numbers guru in your life who helps you with the clarity. I love and respect Chris, but I actually have a different bookkeeper that I've been working with for a long time. But she's kind of like not so much my numbers guru as just my empowerment of the clarity with numbers. And it really does make a difference. So whether you work with Chris or you work with somebody else, we just want you to have clarity and have a successful 2022. We're grateful for your kind attention to the Numbers Matter podcast. We'll hopefully be back again next month. This has been a big experiment. So in closing, I want to ask for your feedback. If you have comments, if there are things that we're talking about in particular that you found useful, please let us know. If there's subjects that you would love us to cover in the future, we would love that input as well. So on behalf of my co-host here, Chris Wakehoff of his website is nmaab.com, and Christy Strow from ChristyStrow.com. That's Christy, ChristyStrauch.com. I did it right, Christy?
You did.
Way to go. And I'm John Leland from CommBridges.com. Thanks again for watching or listening to Numbers Matter, the small business podcast about empowering your business success through clarity with numbers.